I couldn't count how many fire brigade is coming in, the police.
But obviously the fire brigade responded quickly. They were there within 6 minutes.
Yes,
but,
yes.
But they weren't able to stop that spread.
No. Because that spread is very quickly, very, very quickly, very quickly.
They're trying to be safe to people, but they save some people. But I see when they go high, I see the people. From the window, somebody with a fire. I see my own eyes.
Somebody who was on fire, jumping.
On fire, jumping on.
And I was shaking, because I never see like this in my whole life. And I would feel sorry.
It's absolutely horrific, isn't it? Naseen, how will the community cope with this? It is a diverse community, it's a close-knit community, isn't it? We've seen a lot of people bringing stuff to help people down here.
Our community is very close to the people. It's a very nice people, very good. I'm also give us some donation, the money, because if they want any need from me, I can help them, So, because I live in this area is 31 years in this building, I was living.
And you don't know anybody in the building, but you previously have known people in there.
Previously, my friend was living in the 14th floor. I know that building.
Naseen and Anya, thank you very much for talking to us. You obviously saw some horrific things last night, and thank you for sharing them with us. Many people telling similar stories, actually. A lot of people saying that they did see people jumping, or even worst case scenario, people throwing children from buildings, one eyewitness has said. So it was a horrific evening for those in this area last night, and you can see 12 hours on now, the fire is still smouldering, flames still licking from the 24th window. The fire services have reached floor 17 with their hoses from the outside, but those hoses have been put on cranes and they are being winched up, and there is really a limit to how high they can get with these hoses, but they are now at the 17th floor and still doing all they can to extinguish this fire. The smoke is diminishing a little, I have to say, but there is still a grey pall over large parts of West London. It can be seen from a very, very long way away. Let's talk to Ashish Joshi. Now, Ashish is down at one of the centres that have been set up to help those who were in the building last night, those who managed to escape, those who were lucky enough to get away in the early hours of the morning. Many of them simply the clothes that they were standing in. And as it was 1 in the morning, many of them were in their night clothes, didn't even have a chance to pick up phones, car keys or anything like that. Ashish, what help are they being offered where you are?
As much help as many of the people here need. I've been told by local politicians that a bed will be found for every single displaced person. Food will be provided, clothing, toys for children, toiletries, medicine, anything that anyone needs will be provided. Really the community, the way they have come together has been nothing short of incredible. But before we talk about a community coming together to help those who have been displaced, I want to speak to Ahmed Silat, who is he's a local community worker. He's been involved with the community here for the last 20 years. The awfulness of what happened last night is still very much a fresh tragedy for Ahmed and his family. They're still waiting for news of members of their family who've not been heard from since this morning. Ahmed, what is the situation, as you understand, with members of your family?
Well, they've been missing since the fire started. The last time I spoken to the wife is about 2:15 this morning. When I had my breakfast, I have my dinner, and I was about to go to sleep. I've heard sirens everywhere. I look at my window and I saw police, fire brigade, fire engines, and I thought something going on. Went back to my room, I looked out of my bedroom and I saw Grenfell Tower on fire between the 4th and the 8th floor on the left-hand side of the building. I rushed downstairs to my daughter to wake her up, to phone her aunt and to phone her uncle. By the time we came out, it was like less than 5 minutes. Just put my sandals on. Half of the building was on fire. We phoned the aunt, she was safe. But when we got there, tried to phone the uncle, first time, second time, we got hold of his wife. When I asked her why didn't she come out, she said they're not letting us go out, but we are here. They said they're coming to get us. I said, can I speak to your husband? She said he's talking to the emergency people. And then members of the family start talking to her. She sounds like very calm. And I asked about the kids. She said they are all right. Then the next, about 10 minutes later, 15, we phone her back and she said they asked us to go to the bedroom and smoke. The last time she said to me that smoke is coming heavily from the doors.
She was telling you this on the phone?
On the phone, yes. And I said, what happened? She said, Aziz is talking to them and they said they're coming to get us. And that was the last time I spoken to them.
This is a terribly difficult time for you. We hope, everyone hopes, that they've been rescued by the emergency services.
I hope so, because we haven't heard nothing. So far, nothing been heard.
I know this is a difficult time for you, Ahmed. The community here, the North African community of which you are a member, you think many lives could have been saved because so many people were awake because it was Ramadan?
That's what I said. If it wasn't of Ramadan, there would have been more casualties because it was the big time of everybody is awake to have their Last Supper. That's why so many lives were saved. If it wasn't of that, would have been more casualties.
And you're involved with the local community. Lots of people speaking to the media today saying that they have expressed concern about the safety in Grenfell Tower for months. They've been warning something like this could happen. Is that your understanding?
That's exactly the understanding for a long time. It's nothing something new. It's the community has concern about the fire exit, the instructions of the building, the cheap things they bring around. It's so many things, but we are just talking to a brick wall, and we got used to it. And something like this ought to happen. We were expecting it, but to this extent, we didn't. We were expecting something, but not to this extent.
And you witnessed some devastating.
As soon as we came out, there was no police cordon. There was nothing. We went straight to the building, near by the side of the swimming, and we can see kids waving, people shouting, screaming, because there were lights still on, and we could see them. I've heard that some people jumped, but I didn't see them. I mean, they told some, but we didn't see people jumping, but we can see people waving, and I could see my brother-in-law, in his window, light was on, and then suddenly everything went. It was between the left-hand side of the building and the right-hand side. It was like a good hour before the fire jumped into the other side. A lot of life could have been saved, but so far we don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it was very difficult for the emergency service to enter the building or to get access to it just because of the intensity of the blaze.
No, we understand that, but nobody can explain it. It looks like we saw a lot of fire brigade, a lot of police, a lot of ambulances, but where are the people? We want to know what was wrong with others, the one who was inside. They didn't come and tell us. Now a journalist came to me and said the police confirmed that 6 dead. Who are they? Why they don't come us and tell us? We've been waiting all day. We're waiting for the council to come, they never turn up. We're waiting for the TMO to come, they never turn up. Local authority to come, they never turn up. We've been here from 1 o'clock. Now people are just jumping, telling that they're doing their job, but they're not. There was a list of missing people and it wasn't written accordingly. When I look at it, it's people taking names, nothing official. This is a serious case. This is very serious. We need official people to come and assess what's going on, but they're not doing it, sadly. They're not doing it.
Neighbours that you've been speaking to who will have nowhere to sleep tonight, have they been reassured by community groups who have said there is food, medicine, clothing, shelter available for them?
At the moment, the local authority are taking names only. But the Manar Mosque, the Harrow Club, and Rugby Club
and the local church
are offering everything for the community, and the community as a whole is working as one person together. They're helping. We're taking people to our homes. Other people are coming, inviting us with food and drinks and cold water, and they're asking to shelter residents. That was this morning when they all came out because police were clearing everybody, residents and non-residents. When we come close to residents, We had to shelter them and take them to our home, but they refused. They said they wanted to stay. They wanted to see what's going on. But most of them disappeared now. The ones here, they're not residents. Most of them are not. They're just friends and relatives.
Okay. Ahmed, thank you for talking to Sky. I pray that there is good news and then you find your brother-in-law and your family and your nephews and nieces.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed. So that's just one person who has told us his story. He's still waiting for members of his family to be found. He doesn't know where they are. He lost contact with his sister-in-law at about 2 o'clock this morning when she said there was thick smoke coming into the apartment or the flat where they live. A desperate situation here for people still waiting to hear about their loved ones, and you can understand directed towards the local authority, towards local politicians who have pledged to do all they can, but there will be a lot of searching, soul searching and serious questions being asked afterwards about the safety that existed for these families in Grenfell Tower.
Okay, Ashish, thanks very much. There are sadly many people in a similar situation who are desperately searching for loved ones at where you are and at other places around London. You can see the fire service still doing all they can there. 250 firefighters were involved in trying to extinguish this blaze overnight. They have now reached the 18th floor with their hoses from the outside. We know that they are also inside the building and working from floor to floor inside the building. We were warned by the London Mayor Sadiq Khan that the death toll of 6 is expected to rise and that it will be possibly quite a long, slow process as the emergency crews move from room to room and from flat to flat to discover who may or may not still be inside. We'll have more on this developing story after this short break. Well, you join me live in West London, close to the Grenfell Tower, where it's known that 6 people perished last night in this extraordinary fire that engulfed this building. We spoke to one eyewitness a short time ago, and she said she thought it was a matter of just 5 or 10 minutes before the fire spread from the ground floor all the way to the top. We haven't had that confirmed by the authorities, but it does seem that the building did spread up the outside of the building, according to eyewitnesses, and it did certainly spread very, very quickly. Now, the emergency services were thankfully able to get a number of people out of that building. Some 64 were taken to hospital by ambulance. Let's cross now to Katerina Vitosi, who's at one of the hospitals, has been receiving these people. 6 hospitals across the capital have been taking in people, and also 10 people presented themselves to hospital, not travelling in an ambulance, suffering from the effects of being in the building. Katerina, what's the situation where you are? What are they telling you?
Well, I'm at St Mary's Hospital in Paddington, and this is the hospital closest to the tower block. It's just a short distance west of here. A little earlier, we had a statement from Julian Redhead, who's the medical director of the Imperial College Trust, which runs both St Mary's Hospital here and Charing Cross Hospital, and he outlined some of the numbers about those who are being admitted and treated at those 2 sites.
Both St Mary's and Charing Cross hospitals declare a major incident in response to the fire at Glenfield Tower Block in Kensington. Both hospitals have received casualties and the incident is ongoing. At St Mary's, we are caring for 16 patients, 3 of whom are in a critical condition. At Charing Cross Hospital, we have 4 patients, none of whom are critical. I'm very proud of the fantastic response from our staff, both those on duty and those who came in as a response to the major incident protocol.
So that's a total of 20 patients being treated by this hospital trust, so that's at the 2 hospitals, St Mary and Charing Cross. 4 other hospitals treating patients, Chelsea and Westminster, the Royal Free, St Thomas's and King's Hospital. We've been told by the officials here that the majority of cases that they're seeing are victims who are displaying symptoms of smoke inhalation, as you would imagine from a fire of this scale. The medical director, Julian Redhead, also went on to commend the emergency services. This is their major incident protocol that they've got in place here, and they said that they were calling staff in overnight who have been sort of treating the victims of that tower block fire, and they're calling on the public to do their part. The A&E services here are very occupied dealing with the victims of that fire, and they are asking people to, if possible, and it's sort of not dangerous, to go to a local medical facility, or indeed get their medical services from their local GPs if they can. It's not only victims that we've seen outside this hospital in St Mary's. We've also seen families and friends of people who have been involved in the fire. We've been speaking to a family who haven't heard from a relative of theirs who was on one of the higher floors in this tower block. Security staff here and hospital staff have been providing as much information as they can, and also referring people both to sort of local community centres where they're trying to find an account for people who so far haven't been heard from.
Katerina, thanks very much for that, and that is really echoed by the scenes around here. I've seen a lot of people standing on phones in tears, desperately trying to contact loved ones, talking to friends, saying, when did you last speak to them? Were they at home? I've seen also a number of people just standing simply shell-shocked, in tears, just standing looking at the tower, almost unable to comprehend what they are seeing, that in 2017 a building housing hundreds of people could apparently burst into flames and catch fire comprehensively within a matter of minutes. Let's talk now to Tony Devenish from the London Assembly. You're a Conservative Westminster councillor. How was this able to happen, do you think?
Well, that's what we're going to hopefully definitely find out in the weeks and months to come. Today I really want to say 2 things. Once, thank you very much to the emergency service at London Fire Brigade Ambulance Service, who have done a fantastic job today. And obviously our thoughts are with those that have lost their lives or are injured or are missing at the moment.
We have seen over the last few weeks, sadly, the emergency services pressed into action for large-scale events 3 times now. They do an extraordinary job, don't they?
Absolutely, and I was talking to the Commissioner earlier, he was saying some of these crews were the crews at the London Bridge, for example, so, you know, hats off to all the emergency services, they've done a fantastic job, and the community as well has really come together today. You see people out giving food out to friends, the faith services are all here, so it's been a great piece of news in terms of the good news in terms of how we've responded, but clearly we need to make sure this never happens again.
How will we learn those lessons? What should happen next? We have had calls for an independent inquiry. Do you think that's a sensible idea?
Well, certainly the London Assembly will take up calls and look into that, but we'd like to lead that as well with the local authority and with the Mayor.
There are many other tower blocks like this around London, aren't there? As a councillor, how concerned are you that there may be people living in buildings that are potentially not safe?
Well, of course, we don't want to alarm anybody today. This is a 1 in a million incident, we hope. But of course, we've got to do a full review of what has happened here and look at similar blocks across London. You're absolutely right.
Okay. Tony Devonish, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, we did hear from the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan. He was here less than an hour ago alongside the fire and ambulance services, telling us, reconfirming that 6 people have died, that they do fear that that number will rise over the coming hours. Let's just remind ourselves what Sadiq Khan said.
The Fire Commissioner has taken me to see for myself Grenfell Tower, and it is extremely distressing and devastating. Can I begin by saying my thoughts and prayers, as I'm sure the thoughts and prayers of the entire country are with the family and friends of those in the building and affected by this tragic and horrific fire. Also pay tribute to the amazing emergency services from the fire service. We have more than 250 firefighters, many of whom have been here from the beginning, including the Commissioner. There'll be many more working during the course of the day. Many engines and machinery here, and fire service from neighbouring fire services helping us out today. Also, London Ambulance Service, more than 100 paramedics helping out during the course of the night, and more than 100 police officers. And it's worth reminding ourselves that when there are these tragic fires, these emergencies, there are literally emergency services, our firefighters running towards the fire, running towards the danger, whilst encouraging others to run away. If you're somebody who lives in the building and has left safely, please let us know you are safe, because obviously what we want to do is make sure that everyone's accounted for. The focus of the experts today is the search and rescue. Very soon, I'm afraid, it'll move on to recovery. But there are genuine concerns, reasonable concerns that have been raised during the course of the night, and it's really important that these questions are answered.
Many questions by the Mayor, and also many questions by those who live in this area who are still searching for loved ones as the fire service continues their work on this building that is still smouldering behind me. We'll have lots more after this short break.
Hello, I'm Claire Bridge with your showbiz news. A warning, there's some flash photography coming up. Rapper and music producer Sean Diddy Combs has been named the world's highest paid entertainer. He earned an estimated $130 million in a year thanks to his Bad Boy Family reunion tour and earnings from his clothing line. Beyoncé moved into second spot, earning $105 million, courtesy of her best-selling Lemonade album and world tour. And author J.K. Rowling moved into third place, thanks largely to her Harry Potter spin-off movie franchise, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, netting her around $95 million. American singer Halsey has scored her first #1 album on the Billboard 200 chart with Hopeless Fountain Kingdom. It also makes her the first solo female artist to top the album chart in 2017. The singer shot to fame last year when she featured on the Chainsmokers' hit summer single, Closer. Ice Cube has been honoured with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The rapper turned actor and movie producer, who began acting in 1991, was accompanied by his friends and family for the ceremony.
Man, I'm so honored to be here. You know, it's a great day. I want to thank, you know, everybody in the city of Los Angeles, city of Hollywood, everybody that had anything to do with me getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
And the cast and crew of Cars 3 have been at the film's premiere in California. In the film, the famous Lightning McQueen loses his racing title, leaving many to wonder if he'll retire after a terrible crash. The film's out later this week.
You'll never be the racer you once were. You can't turn back the clock, kid. But you can wind it up again.
The racing world is changing.
Treadmills, wind tunnels, virtual reality. Still working on that.
Well, he joined us live in West London as we look at these images from the Grenfell Tower that has now been burning for over 12 hours. Smoke still pouring from the upper story windows. Parts of the building, the roof does appear to still be intact, but you can see that the rest of the building is entirely burnt out. You can see clear daylight from one side of the building to the other, and also from the upper stories out through the roof, which has all but disappeared. This was, of course, social housing. Let's talk to Stephen Mackenzie. He's a fire and safety expert. Stephen, we heard from the developers, we heard from the people who refurbished these flats just a couple of years ago. Anyone who knows anything about social housing and the building that surrounds it will know that there isn't a T not crossed or an I not dotted, is there? They are very, very strict on regulations for these kind of houses.
Yes, definitely. Social housing and houses in multiple occupation are heavily regulated and licensed in certain things. Therefore, it's quite a tragic event that's occurred today, and it will raise concerns with the community. It will also throw up questions about how we accommodate the more vulnerable members of the society, how we can either develop our buildings as life support, protect them in place as we've had to do in this instance, so they can have assisted evacuation, or how we can put measures and provisions in place to slow the fire down in its tracks or facilitate self-evacuation. Now, it's a very challenging thing that's facing the whole sector just now, and hopefully on the back of this strategy and the potential Common Court public inquiry, we can start teasing out some of the more complicated issues in protection of persons in social housing and the more vulnerable members of society.
So just give us some idea, if you were involved in building this building or in refurbishing it, what would you have to ensure, for example, about the materials you were using?
Well, you need to use within our building standards we have the absolute basic societal minimum. Now, is there additional features that we can put in place to improve the levels of safety and inversely reduce the level of fire risk? And that's why we've moved to a risk-based approach. But it's always going to be a cost-benefit implication against the life safety implication, unfortunately. There are
but would there be situations where fire safety wasn't thought of because of the cost implications in social housing, or would your instinct be that actually they very much do everything by the book?
I think it's a balance between the statutory minimum requirement and the available funds and the competing interests within various design or facilities management requirements. Buildings are incredibly complicated, and if we work with schools of architecture or academic research or looking at previous fire incidents, it's a very complicated issue, and it isn't one single failure mode, and many times it's a cascade that results in the tragedy. Can we improve things? Well, there's always move to improve our legislation, improve our technologies, move towards residential homes with auto suppression systems. They won't extinguish a fire, but they may contain it to buy people extra time. And with this case, it looks as if people are instructed to stay in their flats because that protective life support core has failed. And that's normally where we give people refuge for staged evacuation.
That obviously wasn't successful for some people here, we do believe, in the building. Talking to an eyewitness a short time ago, she said she thought that the fire spread from the bottom to the top in a matter of minutes. She may have been mistaken, it was late at night, but other eyewitnesses have said that it certainly did spread very, very quickly. To spread externally. We know that that building had recently been clad.
Yes.
Any chance that that wouldn't have been a fire retardant material on the side of a building of this nature, given the regulations?
The regulations require a specific level of fire resistance for your external cladding, for your ignitability, your surface spread of flame, the size of your openings, the spacing of your openings. It's within a prescriptive codes. If we have a building that's more complicated, we can go to more engineering bases to look at the minutiae of the design. But if it's a refurbishment and a cosmetic provision, it should meet current code standards that has been tried and tested, as the acting fire commissioner has stated in some precedent in London at this time.
And indeed, and we have heard from the builders that were involved in the refurbishment to say that they did indeed meet all health and safety guidelines, and they did meet all the fire regulations that they were meant to. So one would assume that what was being put on the outside of this building was something that was believed to be something that wouldn't conduct fire.
Well, I think it depends on the nature of the material and the class of material and the construction quality for the completed works as well. Do we have horizontal and vertical separation? Do we have the correct material installed on the outside? Does it have an adequate fire test certificate? Were there any oversights within the design or construction or regulatory process? And this will be teased out with the commencement of fire investigation as of now, and through any further corner court or public inquiries.
Would you ever feel comfortable living at the top of a block of flats like that, knowing what you know about fire safety and regulations?
Yes, is the end answer, because we have a high standard of fire safety in the UK. We have very few fire fatalities, very few injuries. We have a declining number of fires if you look at our statistics in comparison to other countries, and essentially we have an environment where we have these events that gets us and forces us to rethink our safety levels and standards.
Indeed,
and it's a constant process.
How tragic it is that it's taken this event to potentially change some things for many people. Stephen Mackenzie, thank you very much for the time being. We're going to have continuing coverage of this ongoing news story throughout the rest of the day here on Sky News. Stay tuned. Breaking news live from West London as 6 are confirmed dead after an inferno engulfed this 24-storey tower block. The Grenfell Tower block is still ablaze as London's fire commissioners say crews managed to reach the 20th floor on foot, rescuing large numbers of residents.
Were jumping. I think at that point it was you either jump in trying to save your life, you might break a few bones or get engulfed in that flame.
More than 70 people are being treated at 6 hospitals across the capital with emergency centres set up for those evacuated from the area. Relatives of the missing make desperate pleas for news of their loved ones. Theresa May says she's deeply saddened by the tragic loss of life. A cross-government meeting will be held this afternoon. Sadiq Khan says there are questions to be answered as it emerges residents were advised to stay in their flats.
There are very legitimate and very reasonable questions that a whole host of people are asking, and they deserve and demand answers.
Declared as a major incident, police describe it as a truly shocking fire. As people are told to stay away from the scene, we'll have the very latest developments. Well, hello from Sky News live in West London, where 6 people have sadly died in a huge fire at a 24-storey tower block. Emergency crews managed to get to the 20th floor of Grenfell Tower, and a large number of residents were rescued. London Ambulance Service say 74 people have been admitted to 6 hospitals across London, 20 of them in critical care, while evacuation shelters have been set up for residents. A warning, this report by Sky's Ian Woods contains witness accounts that some viewers may find upsetting.
London's worst fire for decades began just before 1 a.m. It appears to have started on a lower floor of the tower block, but quickly spread upwards and sideways through the 24-storey building. One family close to where the fire began were woken by their neighbour banging on the door.
It's by chance that we had a knock, and the guy who knocked so happens to be the guy whose house was the cause of the whole thing. It's his fridge. He explained to us as he came down afterwards and was outside the building, he explained to us that it was due to his fridge which exploded. That's what he kept saying. On the 4th floor.
Those who live in the streets surrounding Grenfell Tower watched in horror as the flames took hold.
It was just like a waterfall on the left-hand side of fire and flames, but now it's spread all to the right of the building, that part there, and it's also gone down the left-hand side of the building as well.
The best thing you guys can do if you've got family, friends, relatives, stay behind the line.
We could hear people screaming, help me, and flashing their phone lights to let people know that they were there.
There's nothing, you're just helpless.
Several hundred people live in the tower block, and many did manage to escape.
I've opened the window and I heard some woman saying it's getting bigger. So I've gone out to the hallway, I've looked through the spire hole, I see smoke everywhere. I've opened the door and the neighbours were there, the people screaming, the firemen said, get down the stairs. So I've grabbed the little girl, grabbed my girlfriend, ran out of the house. I heard a lot of screams and I could see, after I got outside, I was looking up and I could see people banging on the windows and there was fire all around them. It was horrendous.
As dawn broke, the building was still an inferno, and witnesses described dreadful scenes of desperate people trapped inside their homes.
She was quite high up, like just above the middle, and she was screaming, I've got a baby, please help me get out, I can't get out, I'm trapped, I need to save my baby. I did see a few people jump, people were jumping. I think at that point it was, you either jump in trying to save your life, you might break a few bones or get engulfed in that flame.
Debris was falling, and then when you looked a little bit further, the other side of the tower was on fire. There's people rolling down sheets and trying to make ropes to get down. Obviously, they must have been trapped and they couldn't get out, and there was banging on the windows, screaming, flashing lights to try and get their attention. There was the fire brigade trying to put ladders up at different parts of the building. There was a bloke that jumped out at what was on fire, and there was another bloke that jumped out and broke his leg.
While her firefighters still fought to bring the blaze under control, London's fire commissioner confirmed the extent of the tragedy.
This is an unprecedented incident. In my 29 years of being a firefighter, I have never ever seen anything of this scale. Our first fire engines were on scene in under 6 minutes. Crews wearing breathing apparatus and extended duration breathing apparatus have been working in extremely challenging and very difficult conditions to rescue people and to bring this major fire under control. At this time, I am very sad to confirm that there have been a number of fatalities. We have got a structural engineer who, in conjunction with my urban search and rescue advisor, is monitoring the stability of the building. At the moment, the building continues to be safe for our crews to go and work in.
In the confusion, many people are worried about what's happened to family and friends.
Right? Very, very, very small.
Tito, I'm alive. I'm all right. I'm in Arrow Club.
The building had recently been refurbished. A residents' action group say they've been complaining for years about fire safety and that only a catastrophic event would expose the issues.
So I peeked through the window. I saw fire engines everywhere. At least one of them could have pressed our bells to say, wake up all of you, there's fire in your building. Nothing.
Were there no alarms in the corridor?
No alarm. Nothing. Nothing.
In the 2.5 years I was there was never an evacuation test. Then one of the new boilers tripped out the beginning of last year, and we lost power to the building. And half of the emergency stairwell was not lit, so the emergency lighting did not work on half of the stairwell.
The official advice to residents in the event of a fire was to stay within their flats and await rescue. But the Mayor of London says that firefighters couldn't get above the 12th floor. He says that questions will need to be answered as soon as possible about what went wrong.
You're right to raise the question about issues raised by tenants on that block and others. And the reason why it should be a huge source of concern for all of us is there are many tower blocks across London and across the country. Many of them are the responsibility of local authorities. Others are the responsibility of private management companies. And we need to make sure that the legitimate questions people have are answered. But you'll appreciate that our focus today has to be search and rescue and then recovery.
In the early hours of the morning, one man spoke on the phone to a relative trapped on the 21st floor.
The woman sounds like calm, and she wasn't panicked or anything. And I said, where is your husband? She said, he's talking to the emergency. And I said, why didn't you come out? She said, they tell us to stay in. We cannot come out. And I said, what did they ask you to do? She said, they asked us to cover the doors with towels. And she said, but the fire is coming heavily. And then about, I think, 10, 15 minutes later, we phoned them back. And I said, where is your husband? She said, he's still talking. And they said, they're coming to us. And I said, what happened? She said, the last thing she said, smoke is coming heavily through the door into the flat. And that was the last time we heard of her.
More than 200 firefighters were deployed. Residents who were led to safety by them praised their courage.
As I was going downstairs, you had 3 firefighters going up the stairs, putting their BA sets on, basically going up, trying to rescue as many people as they possibly did.
The authorities admit that at the moment they have no idea how many people are still unaccounted for.
You know, I pray to God that they're okay. The fire did go and spread to that part of the building, their parts of the building, and I know that I was told from people who had managed to contact them that they had moved to the flats next door, but we've asked around. I know people, the services and the authorities here are still trying to gather information. We've gone to several of the rescue centres that have been set up and asked and given names, but we've had nothing so far. I know it takes a while. I'm just praying to God that they're all right.
London hospitals dealt with dozens of casualties, as well as those seeking information about loved ones who are missing. The scale of the inferno means it could be many hours or even days before the final numbers of dead and injured from this disaster are known. Ian Woods, Sky News.
Well, we are seeing fewer flames coming from the top stories of Grenfell Tower, but the fire is still clearly going on. You can see smoke pouring from one window there on around the 18th floor. The fire service have had their hoses trained on this particular area that we can see from this side for at least the last hour and a half, literally just focusing on 2 or 3 flats in the absolute heart of the building. There is still a portion of the roof which does appear to be undamaged, which is astonishing given the length of time and the ferocity of this blaze. But For every single other flat, you can see right through the building. You can see daylight clearly from one side of the building to the other, and you can also see daylight through the roof. You can still see some flames licking still at the 24th floor. Well, our correspondent Mark White, our Home Affairs correspondent, is a little closer to the tower. He has a different vantage point. Mark, what are you able to see?
Yeah, a lot of the flames that were sort of licking out some of the windows in the middle section of the tower block have been knocked back again. It's pretty much just smouldering on this side of the tower block, and there are still hot spots, so every now and again you see a flare up, but that's relatively quickly put down by the firefighters. The blaze itself is clearly well under control, bar these hotspots, which the firefighters have to be very mindful of as they make their way initially from the bottom floors, now right in the top floors of this tower block, looking for those we're told are still unaccounted for. And although we're told that the death toll of 6 is likely to rise, what the authorities haven't been able to tell us so far is whether there is a significant number of people that are unaccounted for. The hope is that many of those who might be unaccounted for may have actually managed to get out of the building okay. Maybe they didn't have their mobile phones with them, or they've been taken to a refuge centre, one of the numerous community centres that have been opening their doors to people around here and showing such tremendous generosity, with lots of people in the local community bringing clothes and food and water and just support really to help people out. So the hope is that maybe some of those who are unaccounted for may have made it safely to these refuge centres, and at some point they will get in touch with the emergency services to let them know that they are okay. In terms of the ongoing investigation, well, of course, it will focus on a number of things. We still don't know what the potential cause of this fire was, but also just how it spread so rapidly. Many of the witnesses we spoke to overnight and throughout the morning said it was that cladding on the side of the building, a polystyrene type of material, that really acted as a conductor. It was allowing the flames to really rapidly spread throughout the tower block, on the outside initially, but then clearly the flames made their way inside. And in terms of the advice that was given to residents by the property management company, we've obtained a poster that shows that they were given advice to stay indoors in the event of a fire. That advice effectively says if the fire's not in your own flat, if it's in a neighbouring flat or elsewhere in the tower block, then the safest thing to do is to stay indoors. Now that's a real concern, obviously, given the type of blaze that we were faced with last night. I spoke to David Collins a little earlier. He was a former member of the residency committee for the tower block, and he told me that he had serious issues with the management company, especially when it came to safety protocols with regard to fire safety.
There may have been fire alarm tests with the fire brigade. I've witnessed the fire brigade be in the tower block, but in the 2.5 years I was there was never an evacuation test.
And in terms of the protocols for dealing with a blaze within the tower block, the instruction, as you understand it from the management organisation to the tenants, is stay within your flat?
Yes, it was to stay in your flat and await rescue, await recovery.
Well, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, speaking a little earlier, said there are very legitimate questions to be asked about those safety protocols going forward, especially as there are so many tower blocks here in the capital but elsewhere around the country as well. But having said that, he said the immediate priority must be for the fire and rescue services to try and account for all those who are missing at the moment.
The focus of the experts today is the search and rescue. Very soon, I'm afraid, it'll move on to recovery. But there are genuine concerns, reasonable concerns that have been raised during the course of the night, and it's really important that these questions are answered.
Well, there was a very significant refurbishment of this tower block just over a year ago. That resulted in this cladding being put to the outside of the building. And clearly that refurbishment, the work that was carried out, the moving of boilers and fuse boxes within the building as well will also be looked at. We've had a statement from Ryden Construction, the firm that carried out this refurbishment, and they have said Ryden completed a refurbishment of the building in the summer of 2016 for Kensington and Chelsea Tenant Management Organisation on behalf of the council, which met all the required building control, fire regulation and health and safety standards. The statement goes on, we will cooperate with the relevant authorities and emergency services and fully support their inquiries into the causes of this fire at the appropriate time. As I say, the investigations will have to conclude into the actual cause of the fire. The search and rescue operation will have to conclude before any meaningful investigation into procedures here can take place. But it will be a priority for those going forward who are tasked with ensuring that building regulations and people's safety are uppermost.
Mark, thanks very much. Well, details are beginning to emerge of those who are missing after the fire as their friends and family appeal for information. Some of the names are coming out now. 12-year-old Jessica Urbano, she is missing. Her aunt says that she was in the tower. She became separated from her family in the fire. Friends of her aunt have been appealing for information on social media and have asked people to help search hospitals and to get in touch if they see her or find her. Also missing, local artist Khadija Say and her mother Mary Mendy. They were both in the tower on the 20th floor last night. They've not been heard from since either. The Labour MP David Lammy is joining that search for that missing artist, who's a friend of his. We can speak to him now. David Lammy, good to talk to you. What is the last that you know was heard of your friend?
Well, we know that Khadija was on the 20th floor. We know that she was communicating on Facebook in the early hours of the morning about getting out of the building. That communication, of course, became more distressed, and her last communication was that she felt faint. We are praying. She is a wonderful young artist who's been mentored by my wife, Nicola Green, and is on show currently at the Venice Biennale. We are praying that Khadija is in a hospital or in a centre and unable to contact us. We know that some people got off the 18th floor and potentially the 20th, and we are praying for her and her mother as we speak and searching the hospitals.
Indeed, we have heard that the fire service were able to get as far as the 20th floor. The question, though, is, of course, how quickly they were able to get there before the smoke had really taken hold, isn't it?
That's the case. All of us have seen the extent of the fire raging across the building. It's hard to get one's head around what it must have felt like to be that far up in the building. But my heart goes out to families and friends. I know how they're feeling. This is a beautiful, beautiful young woman, Khadija. Absolutely beautiful. With her mother, Gambian of origin, and someone making a tremendous contribution to the British art scene, one of our emerging artists. So we pray that Khadija is in a local hospital or in a centre, unable to make contact at this point because she hasn't got her mobile phone, but we need her to be with us.
Had she ever expressed any concerns about the fire procedures in the building that she was living?
No, she hadn't expressed those concerns to me, but obviously as the Member of Parliament for Tottenham, I too have tower blocks not that dissimilar from this. You've heard what the tenants have been saying about the alarm system, about sprinklers. These were buildings built in the 1960s and 70s. I have to say, they're not a high point in British architecture. This building has recently been refurbished. Many of them are no longer really in council care. They're managed by private companies. And of course there will be big questions that people will have to answer in relation to the procedures for these buildings. But those questions have to wait until another day. But I certainly, as a Member of Parliament, will be pressing this case on behalf of the many, many families, and I suspect victims in that building.
Okay. David Lammy, thanks very much for joining us, and we do hope that you get some good news from your friend and that they get in touch soon. And there are many people in a similar position to Mr. Lammy around this part of London today. They've come down here because they just can't get in touch with their loved ones. They maybe spoke to them late last night, they knew they were in the building, and they haven't been answering their phone since. And many people are simply going from centre to centre to try to see if their loved ones are there, and if they have just left their phone behind, don't know numbers, but they are safe and well. But we are seeing many, many distressed people coming down to this part of London, desperately searching for news of those that live in the tower. We'll have more on the story after this short break.
We've never seen a whale here before. This is unusual.
A dying whale mysteriously appears in a remote Norwegian cove.
Clogged up with items of plastic.
En masse plastik.
Full of plast.
The grim reality of a whale's stomach reveals the alarming scale of plastic in our oceans.
Because this whale was almost a messenger from the deep.
If we don't do something with this problem now, it will kill us.
Sky's Ocean Rescue Campaign presents A Plastic Whale. Starts June 21st on Sky Atlantic.
Changing of the guard and a major policing operation on display, part of added security around one of London's most protected sites. But Sky News has found the number of crimes committed here and at Kensington Palace have more than tripled in the past 5 years. Results from a Freedom of Information request showed that in 2011, 13 crimes were committed. By 2013, that had risen to 44. 2015 saw a further rise to 50, and in 2016, 41 crimes were carried out inside the grounds and immediately outside. You can see from our request that we asked the Metropolitan Police a number of different questions. Unfortunately, they weren't able to answer them, and they explained that was because it would allow interested parties to gain an upper hand and awareness of policing decisions used to safeguard national security. Now, we did go back to them and ask for some clarification on the kind of crimes that they were talking about. They said it was theft, criminal damage and a small number of trespasses. But interestingly, they wouldn't talk about why they think the number of crimes have been going up over the years. In a statement, the Metropolitan Police said the palaces have some of the heaviest footfall of all visitor attractions in the capital. In 2016, a total of 41 offences were recorded for the two venues. Most of these were reported as taking place in and around Buckingham Palace. This amounts to approximately one crime per 20,000 visitors.
I think there's a balance in any kind of democracy. When we pay hundreds of millions of pounds in protection, I think the public and you and I have a right to know how that money is spent. You physically can't prevent thousands, as there are here today, coming here and looking.
Well, welcome back to West London, where we are at the scene of last night's extraordinarily ferocious fire here at the Grenfell Tower. And just in front of me now, we are starting to see quite a large number of firefighters coming in. It's possible that this is the shift change. We know that a lot of those who were on the building last night, 250 firefighters in all, trying to dampen down the flames in this building. Many of them stayed on shift all night, including the fire commissioner for the area, and are absolutely exhausted. We know that some of them have suffered minor injuries, but it does seem now that possibly those who've been there all evening and into the next day are happily for them being relieved. The Prime Minister has also made a statement in the last couple of hours. She says she's deeply saddened by the tragic loss of life at the Grenfell Tower. She is being kept constantly updated on the situation. It says her thoughts are with all of those affected by this terrible incident and the emergency services who are working tirelessly in very difficult situations. Let's bring in Stephen Mackenzie again. Now, Stephen, you're a fire and security expert. You've been able to get a little bit closer to the building. What were you able to see?
Well, I've managed to get down to the inner cordon. Given the structural stability of the building and its questionable integrity at this time, there is a robust cordon in place by the Fire and Emergency Services. We also need to be sensitive to any recovery of any fatalities from the building as well. And with the sad reports this morning, 6 fatalities, that number may rise today. And that's the reports from the Acting Commissioner. What we can see is we can see some fire patterns from this southwest corner of the building. We can also see the burn marks and the scorching, but we can see extensive destruction of the external rainscreen or cavity wall cladding.
So this is the stuff that was put on recently, or would this have been original?
No, what you've probably got is a concrete or steel substrate or a mixed mode construction, and then it will be overclad for aesthetic purposes and weatherproofing to improve the standards of the construction. We can't get close enough to actually see how the panels have actually failed, the failure modes of the building, the structural integrity of the building.
And when you say failed, I mean they fell off?
Essentially,
yes.
Essentially.
Yeah.
So we can see some of the residual substrate there, but not a great deal of the residual cladding has been burnt to destruction. We are still seeing a lot of hotspots, and the fire crews will be apprehensive now about their operations and to contain the hotspots, dampen down and make safe the building, and we're seeing additional investigation crews being brought in at this time.
Now, we were talking just a couple of moments ago, and you were saying to me that the way that this structure would have been refurbished in the last couple of years, there would have been an insulation layer put on and the cladding put on top of that, because it wasn't just to make this particularly ugly, in some people's minds, building look more attractive. It was also the flats inside were very cold and they wanted insulation on the outside. You were speculating a few minutes ago that the flames got behind the cladding. What effect would this have had?
Well, the building and cladding system is generally designed that it shouldn't be able to jump floors, but if there's any inherent weaknesses or the cladding experiences conditions beyond its structural integrity, then they are going to fail, and it will accelerate the chimney effect behind the cladding or the internal seams. There is questions over not necessarily this building until we get the full investigation, but the robustness of the quality control insurance of the design, the testing regimes of the cladding systems, its installation, and the location of what we call cavity barriers to stop the fire jumping from one floor to another, either horizontally or vertically.
So essentially what you're saying is if there's a structure on the outside, insulation inside, and the fire was to get in, it would almost act like a chimney. It would be sucked upwards.
It can be if it doesn't have those necessary floor level, horizontal and the vertical barriers. There are different types of cladding systems out there. It's been reported that it's got some sort of curtain wall cladding and some sort of rain screen cladding. And the rain screen cladding normally has a gap to allow moisture to come in down the back and drain out. But what they've got at each floor level is an intumescent fire barrier that expands on heat, and it should close off the gap.
We don't know, of course, exactly what kind of cladding was used in this building, but we do know that the company that carried out the work have said that they did abide by all health and safety regulations and all fire safety regulations. So they themselves seem content that they have certainly done everything by the book. It remains to be seen, of course, when the investigation is carried out into this. More will become clear as to how on earth this was able to spread so very, very quickly. Ashish Joshi is down at one of the evacuation centres. We know that there were hundreds of people in the building, we believe, last night. Many, mercifully, were able to escape, but often simply in the clothes or the night clothes that they were wearing at the time. They've gone to 3 different evacuation centres and being joined also by people hunting for their relatives. Ashish Joshi is down at one of them. Ashish.
Yeah, we're going to speak now to a lady called Marion Telfer. We were speaking earlier to Amit, who was looking for his family. Unfortunately, Marion is in a similar position. Marion, just over your shoulder, there is a photo of Khatija, that poster, which is an appeal to ask if anyone has seen her. Marion, you are her first cousin. You live in Kent. You've come a long way.
Yeah.
What news is there of Khatija?
Khatija sent out a message about 12 hours ago to say that she was trapped and that everybody should pray for her. We've come down trying to look for her. We've been everywhere. We can't find her. And my aunt as well.
So Khadija lived together with your aunt in Grenfell Tower?
Yes.
And the last you heard from her
was about 11 hours ago on Facebook.
On Facebook?
Yes.
Where have you been today? How does one even begin to search for someone amid such a disaster?
We've been everywhere. We've been to every single place that they've asked us to go to. We've separated our families into different places. Some are contacting hospitals, and we're just wandering around trying to look for them since this morning, since around 6 in the morning.
Since 6 this morning, your family has got together here, and you're going to places like this, the community centre here, and your family are conducting searches in hospitals.
Yes.
Who's helping you?
No one. We're doing it ourselves.
Presumably you've been in touch with the police. What have they said?
We've contacted 101 and given them their details, and they've just said that if any information, if we find out any more information, we should contact them and let them know.
I'm sure you've tried to contact your aunt too by mobile phone, or?
We've contacted them. None of their phones are working. Since this morning, since 5-something, we've been calling them. None of their phones are working.
Have you had anything which gives you even a little bit of hope that you will be speaking to Khadija and your aunt? Have you been able to speak to relatives who lived in the tower?
No. We haven't spoken to anyone. No one. We've just been going round in circles looking for them since this morning.
And you'll have to stay here, and you'll have to continue looking for Khadija and her mum.
Mary Mendy.
Mary Mendy?
Yeah.
Until you hear news?
Yes. Yeah.
What would you like the police or the emergency services? This is a very difficult time for them. We understand that, but you're in a very difficult position. What would you like them to do, if they can, to help you look for Khadija and her mum?
Just to let us know if they're safe and well. If anything bad has happened, we would like to know, because we've been going around in circles looking for them the whole morning. So my mom she's been crying the whole day, and we've been getting calls all the way from Africa, people asking what's happened, can we give them any information. I think we just need to put the rest of our family at ease, really.
Where will you go from here after you finish speaking to me? Well, you can make an appeal on Sky News. There are people who are watching this, who are familiar with this neighbourhood, who will be also conducting searches for their loved ones. They may be in a position to help you. What can they do? What would you ask people who are watching to help you?
If anybody knows where Mary Mendy or Khadija Say is, please let us know. Khadija's put a message out on Facebook. You can get through to her on Khadija Say, and then just trying to give us an update on what's going on, really.
Okay, Marion, I hope and I pray that you hear from Khadija and Miriam soon. Thank you for talking to us on Sky News.
Thank you very much.
And really, we do wish you the very best in your search for them. We hope you find them soon.
Thank you very much.
Marion, just another person who we've spoken to today on Sky News. So many people who are separated from their loved ones, desperate to know what's happened to them. You can understand just how difficult it is for the emergency services. We had a situation like this after the attacks in Westminster and in Borough Market, where the emergency services have priorities, and finding people and reuniting them with their loved ones is a priority, but they'll do it as soon as they can. And in the meantime, the agony and the anguish, people like Marion continues. She'll continue with her family, with whatever resources they have, to continue to go to community centres like this, to hospitals, to try and find their loved ones.
You're watching Sky News, where you're watching rolling coverage of this breaking story that we've been bringing you throughout the course of the day after this fire at Grenfell Tower block. We've heard from the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan. He has recently tweeted expressing his devastation at the news, given us an update about the amount of fire crews and emergency service members who've been at the scene, including 250 firefighters, 100 medics in attendance, about 100 police officers. We've also been hearing from the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn. He's been given his reaction to the events of the last few hours. Let's have a listen to what he's had to say.
Totally shocked by it. It's the worst nightmare anyone can think of. A fire in a tower block, and sympathy, support and solidarity to all those that are stuck in the tower or have managed to be rescued, or who've lost loved ones or don't know what has happened to their friends and family. And a huge thank you to the fire service, police and ambulance and all the other emergency services that got there so quickly. The fire service were on the scene within 6 minutes. but fighting a fire in a massive tower block like Grenfell Tower is a huge and very, very dangerous undertaking. We just think about it. We're in a tower block, it's on fire, we want to get out as quickly as we can. The firefighters and the police and everyone else have to go into that incredibly dangerous place, and we rely on them. And we should say thank you to all of them for what they've done today and all the other days that they do it.
People have pointed to the last such tragedy in 2009, when some said at the time there were lessons to be learned about fire protections in buildings. Do you think those lessons have been learned?
There were very clear lessons to be learned then about the installation of sprinklers and the dangers and need for equipment to fight fires in high-rise buildings. Our country has more high-rise buildings than ever before. Look around behind me on the London skyline and you just see them coming all the time. There has to be very, very strong fire regulations, which there are, but there has to be a sprinkler system installed, particularly in residential tower blocks that maybe don't have them at the present time. Those lessons have to be learnt, and Harriet Harman, the MP for Camberwell and Peckham, who represented those people that suffered in the fire there in 2009, has made the point that if you cut local authority expenditure, then a price is paid somewhere.
So do you think that actions that should have been taken haven't been?
I'm not making that statement yet. Today is the day to support the emergency services and the residents, and thank all those that have also given other help: food, water, clothing, shelter, support, all those that have come forward to help people at a time of need and stress. And thank you to all those in the community that have come together in the most amazing way to support people. Tomorrow is the time to ask all those questions, but today let's concentrate on dealing with the consequences of this fire and try and bring comfort and safety and save life wherever it possibly can be saved.
If you're asking the questions tomorrow, can you give us an idea of the kind of areas you're going to be looking into?
The areas one has to look at are the preventative measures that were available or not available in the tower, the facilities available to get in and out of it in an emergency and urgent situation, and the numbers of people available to the fire service, paramedics and emergency services to deal with a crisis like this. We thank all those that work so hard in our emergency services, but we have to make sure properly resourced to deal with this kind of crisis should it occur anywhere else. But today, let's concentrate on saving life.
And will your questions concern politicians? There's been some talk of a review that should have been carried out that some people are suggesting wasn't carried out.
A review took place after the fire in Camberwell, and the government has that review. I believe we need to ask questions about what facilities and resources have been given to every local authority that has tower blocks within the area, and frankly, most do. We need to deal with this. We need people to be safe living in high-rise buildings.
And do you think any of those people in the frame involve current serving frontbench politicians?
Obviously, ministers that served and received those reports must be questioned. But today, every focus and every concentration must be on saving and protecting life.
How does a government in waiting, as you referred to the Labour Party last night, act differently?
We had a meeting this morning of our shadow cabinet, and immediately at the end of the shadow cabinet I convened a meeting of our emergency grouping, which would cover all the areas that are affected by this, of what we would do. And obviously we support the emergency services, but we ask the questions that I've just outlined. We have experienced shadow ministers, and we have people with enormous experience in local government of the reality of dealing with public safety and the housing issues. And so John Healey was there this morning talking about that. Lynn Brown, our shadow fire minister, was also there.
Concerning the Conservative DUP deal, the BBC understands that 95.8% of it has been agreed, but it might not be finalised until next Monday. What's your reaction?
Well, moving on to matters political there, the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn making it quite clear that there are many questions to be asked as a result of this fire here last night. Many questions around the preventative measures that were in place. saying that people who live in tower blocks need to know that they are safe, but saying that today is a day to really thank all those who helped last night, a day to thank the emergency services. Also talking about a report that was released after the Camberwell fire. He's interested to know what resources that were recommended in that report have been given to local authorities and which members of the government had that report and whether or not they acted on it. So many questions still to be asked. Jeremy Corbyn there giving his response to this fire last night. We're going to take a short break now. We'll be back with you soon.
A very good afternoon to you. We've been hearing from the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, who has visited the scene. He's been giving us updates on the latest developments. Let's have a listen into what the London Mayor's had to say.
The Fire Commissioner has taken me to see for myself Grenfell Tower, and it is extremely distressing and devastating. Can I begin by saying my thoughts and prayers, as I'm sure the thoughts and prayers of the entire country are with the family and friends of those in the building and affected by this tragic and horrific fire. Also pay tribute to the amazing emergency services from the fire service. We have more than 250 firefighters, many of whom have been here from the beginning, including the Commissioner. There'll be many more working during the course of the day. Many engines and machinery here and fire service from neighbouring fire services helping us out today. Also, London Ambulance Service, more than 100 paramedics helping out during the course of the night, and more than 100 police officers. And it's worth reminding ourselves that when there are these tragic fires, these emergencies, there are literally emergency services, our firefighters running towards the fire, running towards the danger, whilst encouraging others to run away. If you're somebody who lives in the building and has left safely, please let us know you are safe, because obviously what we want to do is make sure that everyone's accounted for. The focus of the experts today is the search and rescue. Very soon, I'm afraid, it'll move on to recovery. But there are genuine concerns, reasonable concerns that have been raised during the course of the night, and it's really important that these questions are answered.
The London Mayor Sadiq Khan there, clearly shocked by what he saw. He was able to get closer to the tower, able to really see the scale of what the emergency services are trying to still deal with. And they have said, the fire service, that they are going to be there for at least 24 hours and that the recovery, they do believe that there will be bodies inside. The recovery will take a considerable length of time. We've had stories today. We've heard stories of the bravery of the firefighters rushing into the building, but we've also heard some pretty horrific stories from eyewitnesses who've spoken about what they saw last night as the fire crept up the building. Stories of people banging on windows, being trapped inside. Some stories, we spoke to one eyewitness a short time ago who told us that she saw somebody on fire throw themselves out of the building. There have even been reports of people throwing their children from windows. Let's talk to Michael Henry. He's a psychotherapist. He's come down here today. Michael, obviously a traumatic experience for those who would have been in that tower last night. But first of all, let's start with those who witnessed it. How can we help them?
I mean, how you witness them, I mean, secondary trauma from observing, such a kind of horrible scenes. So I think there's something around trying to allow people to process their emotions about what's kind of happened here. But I think,
so does that mean talking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to talk about it, but just giving them a space. I mean, I think there's something about knowing that there's people around that are willing to hold them and kind of have the space for them to kind of feel safe and just kind of feel about how they're trying to, work through this, because I think this is a very much of a long conversation or recovery process or an aftermath of a conversation that's going to be for a lot of people around here in terms of, the devastation that's visited them this morning and last night. So we're still kind of going through that. There's a lot of distressed people down there. They're very kind of focused on Maslow needs at the moment in terms of food, clothing and shelter, and needing to know where they're going to stay tonight, what they're going to do, how they're going to, survive. I think, but after that will be the kind of shock, the post-traumatic stress disorder, maybe the kind of things about what's actually happened. I know there's a lot of people there that might have lost family or friends in this, tragedy. So I came down here because I'm kind of thinking that there'll be people later on after the shock has kind of worn off a little bit or still kind of will need somebody to kind of try and process stuff. So.
And you talk about those who've survived, and people will look at them and say, oh, they're the lucky ones, they got out alive. Yeah. But as you say, we don't know what they've experienced, and we don't know who they've also left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, this is, I think even us that watching it unfold on TV are shocked and traumatic. Found this traumatic experience for us that are just kind of watching it, and the deluge of support that's come down here, because it must be harrowing for those who are kind of, but for you to actually go through it and you can do all these kind of stories about if I had been there that night or something like that. There's still a lot of those to unpack, and maybe there's guilt, there's kind of shame that why me in relation to not somebody else that might have passed or something like that. So there's a lot to unpack in the coming months or coming weeks afterwards.
We've also heard from the emergency services today that the operation of recovery, which it will eventually start to be in that building, will be a long one. How much harder does a delay in finding out make it for people? If your loved ones are dead, not knowing whether they are dead for a number of days, does that increase the trauma considerably?
Absolutely. I mean, there'll be a degree of uncertainty, not knowing if your people are in there. But also, there's just a lot of this will be like we just need a conclusion or we need a final to kind of really, this waiting period will be uncertain in terms of are they or not there. But just wanting some kind of conclusion to what's happening will help to some sort of healing process in terms of what will need to be carried on later on. So there's a lot still to kind of go on in relation to this happened last night, the event happened, but there's just so much that will need to be unpacked and processed for continuation. So, and a lot of people will be going out there, and it will filter through for the community. This is going to be hard for this community for a long time to come yet. So, and that's why I felt like I needed to come down here and try and offer my support in that way. So, yeah. Okay. Thank
Michael,
you.
thanks very much for talking to us.
No problem.
Michael's saying that psychological support, obviously incredibly important for those who've gone through a horrific experience last night, but also physical support. A lot of people lost absolutely everything they possessed. They literally have escaped with the clothes that they were standing in when the fire swept through the building. And to that end, we have seen an enormous number of people who may live in this area or may have come to this area, who are simply arriving with carrier bags full of things like food, nappies, clothes, blankets, to give to those who are victims of what happened here last night, just to give them some kind of comfort in the short term. The community very much here rallying round to do all it can to help those in a really desperate situation. Let's just have a look at what we know about the Grenfell Tower behind me, what we know about it so far and the response to it, what happened last night. The tower itself was built in 1974 and it contains 120 homes and they are over 24 stories. The building was upgraded recently at a cost of £8.6 million. The work finished in May 2016. Crews were first called to reports of a fire at the block in Latimer Road just before 1 o'clock this morning. The London Fire Brigade says the first crews were on the scene in less than 6 minutes. More than 200 firefighters attended the scene, with crews deployed from North Kensington, Hammersmith and Paddington and surrounding stations. We know many of those people were here all throughout the night and well into the day. More than 20 ambulance crews also sent. The Metropolitan Police too attended to help assist their colleagues from other emergency services. It has been an extraordinary effort by all of the emergency services, and as Sadiq Khan pointed out to us a short time ago, they are the people that run towards the danger whilst other people are running from it. And as well as having to try to rescue people from that tower behind me, they also had the unenviable task of trying to prevent people returning into the building. We understand that some people did try to get back in to rescue loved ones, and that is the instinct often in these kind of events, but the fire service have to make that very difficult decision and stop people running back into the burning building, which must be incredibly difficult for all concerned. Well, the building is still smouldering. It does appear now to be really burning itself out. We haven't seen flames coming from the top story in the last few minutes to half hour or so. The hoses that have been trained on around the 17th, 18th floor have now moved from this vantage point. I'm not able to see where to. I'm assuming possibly to another side of the building, but it is still smouldering. The fire service say that they will be here for at least 24 hours, and the recovery for those who've sadly perished inside will take a great deal longer than that. We'll take a short break, more to come in a short while.
We've got another guest here, Father Peter Wilson.
Oh, great. Are we all right?
Okay, Jane, many thanks indeed. Let's go straight to Conor Logan, who's the technical director of Colt International, who are experts in smoke control. Many thanks indeed for joining us this afternoon. Your initial thoughts, Conor, for what you've been hearing and what you've been seeing over the last few hours?
Points raised already, and certainly there's been notes of having smoke in the lobbies and corridors on the apartment levels. But must bear in mind that smoke control systems that are designed for residential buildings like this are not going to stop smoke getting into the lobbies. They're there to protect the staircase and keep the staircase clear of smoke. So there is, if someone's escaping from an apartment that has a fire in it, there will be smoke in the lobby when other people come out of their apartments. The other thing I would point out is these systems are designed for a fire on one floor only. So as soon as the fire spreads from the apartment of origin, or even from the floor of origin, as clearly happened in this instance, the system has gone beyond its design capability.
So Conor, if that's the case, then what would or should the advice be to those people who are living on the site?
The building regulations, or the approved documents to the building regulations, give good guidance on how a building should be designed, and there should be compartmentation between apartments. There should be compartmentation between the lobby and the staircase. There should be compartmentation between the floors, and there should be a limit to the ability of the fire to spread across surfaces. That's all clearly defined in the building regulations. And if a building is designed and built correctly, then the advice of staying in place is good advice. It's only when a design fails or a product or installation fails, as quite possibly has happened in this instance, do those strategies become compromised, and people then should take the advice of or take their own situation into account, and if they feel endangered, make their way to the stairs. The stairs should be the safest point in the building.
OK, Conor Logan, a smoke control expert, joining us from Petersfield. Many thanks indeed.
Well, we have heard some political reaction today. We've heard from the Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn, the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan. Now, let's bring in Harriet Harman. Harriet Harman, you were, I believe, the MP for the Camberwell fire a couple of years ago. You were the MP for that area. Were lessons learned from that fire, do you think?
Well, I mean, first off, it's just horrific to think of the terrible anguish and grief for the families of those who've lost their lives, and the anguish of those whose relatives are missing, not to mention the terror that's been experienced by those who've had to rush out of the building. And I think the very first thing that the government should be doing is actually saying to Kensington and Chelsea Council, whatever you need to be able, by way of money, to help resettle these people, because they will have rushed out. They've got no home, but they'll have no money, they won't have their bank cards or any cash, they'll have no clothes. That they need to be resettled and not sent miles away. They need to be resettled there in Kensington and Chelsea, and the government need to reassure the council that they can do that and they'll have the resources to look after those people. They also need to reassure the hospitals. 6 hospitals now are caring for people, including King's College Hospital in my constituency, who've already still got people from the London, the Borough London Bridge attack. So the Secretary of State...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but time is really upon us. We only have a minute left for the end of the programme. I just wanted to really quickly ask you the recommendations that were handed down after the Camberwell fire. Are you content that they were followed up on?
No, not. I mean, there should have been sprinklers in the block. When a block is refurbished, like this one was, potentially that's a moment for fire safety to be compromised. There should be proper supervision from the council, and that needs to be well resourced, and there needs to be fire inspections. But above all, there needs to be sprinklers. And you know, after the Lakanal House fire, we knew what went wrong. We knew how to stop it again. We knew that it actually would cost money, but it needed to be done. And I'm afraid the government just refused to do what was necessary. And it's just heartbreaking to see that block now with smoke rising out of it, and untold numbers of people have lost their lives.
Okay, Harriet Harman, there we will leave it. Thank you very much for that. We know that there is a cross-party meeting of MPs at 4 o'clock this afternoon, chaired by the Fire and Safety and Security Minister. They are going to be looking at what lessons can be learned and what help can be given to this part of West London, which is reeling from the events of last night. We'll have more at the top of the hour.
Where's there?
News live in West London as at least 6 people are confirmed dead after an inferno engulfed this 24-storey tower block. The Grenfell Tower is still ablaze. Crews managed to reach the 20th floor, rescuing large numbers of residents.
People were jumping. I think at that point it was you either jump in trying to save your life, you might break a few bones or get engulfed in that flame.
More than 70 people are being treated at 6 hospitals across the capital, and evacuation centres have been opened as friends and family of the missing desperately search for their loved ones. Theresa May says she's deeply saddened by the loss of life. A cross-government meeting will be held in an hour's time. And London Mayor Sadiq Khan says there are questions to be answered as it emerges residents were advised to stay in their flats.
There are very legitimate and very reasonable questions that a whole host of people are asking, and they deserve and demand answers.
This is Sky News live in West London, where at least 6 people are known to have died in a huge fire at a 24-storey tower block. Police say they expect the number of dead to rise. Emergency crews managed to get as far as the 20th floor of Grenfell Tower on foot, and a large number of people were rescued, but it's feared many others were not. London Ambulance Service says 74 people have been admitted to 6 hospitals across London. 20 of those are in critical care, while evacuation centres have been set up for residents. While a warning, this report by Sky's Ian Woods contains witness accounts that some viewers may find upsetting.
London's worst fire for decades began just before 1 a.m. It appears to have started on a lower floor of the tower block, but quickly spread upwards and sideways through the 24-storey building. One family close to where the fire began were woken by their neighbour banging on the door.
It's by chance that we had a knock, and the guy who knocked so happens to be the guy whose house was the cause of the whole thing. It's his fridge. He explained to us as he came down afterwards and was outside the building, he explained to us that it was due to his fridge which exploded. That's what he kept saying. On the 4th floor.
Those who live in the streets surrounding Grenfell Tower watched in horror as the flames took hold.
It was just like a waterfall on the left-hand side of fire and flames, but now it's spread all to the right of the building, that part there, and it's also gone down the left-hand side of the building as well.
The best thing you guys can do if you've got family, friends, relatives, stay behind the line.
We could hear people screaming, help me, and flashing their phone lights to let people know that they were there.
But there's nothing, you're just helpless.
Several hundred people live in the tower block, and many did manage to escape.
I've opened the window and I heard some woman saying it's getting bigger. So I've gone out to the hallway, I've looked through the spire hole, I see smoke everywhere. I've opened the door and the neighbours were there, the people screaming, the firemen said, get down the stairs. So I've grabbed the little girl, grabbed my girlfriend, ran out of the house. I heard a lot of screams and I could see, after I got outside, I was looking up and I could see people banging on the windows and there was fire all around them. It was horrendous.
As dawn broke, the building was still an inferno, and witnesses described dreadful scenes of desperate people trapped inside their homes.
She was quite high up, like just above the middle, and she was screaming, I've got a baby, please help me get out, I can't get out, I'm trapped, I need to save my baby. I did see a few people jump, people were jumping. I think at that point it was you either jump in trying to save your life, you might break a few bones or get engulfed in that flame.
Debris was falling, and then when you looked a little bit further, the other side of the tower was on fire. There's people rolling down sheets and trying to make ropes to get down. Obviously, they must have been trapped and they couldn't get out, and there was banging on the windows, screaming, flashing lights to try and get their attention. There was the fire brigade trying to put ladders up at different parts of the building. There was a bloke that jumped out what was on fire, and there was another bloke that jumped out and broke his leg.
While her firefighters still fought to bring the blaze under control, London's Fire Commissioner confirmed the extent of the tragedy.
This is an unprecedented incident. In my 29 years of being a firefighter, I have never, ever seen anything of this scale. Our first fire engines were on scene in under 6 minutes. Crews wearing breathing apparatus and extended duration breathing apparatus have been working in extremely challenging and very difficult conditions to rescue people and to bring this major fire under control. At this time, I am very sad to confirm that there have been a number of fatalities. We have got a structural engineer who, in conjunction with my urban search and rescue advisor, is monitoring the stability of the building. At the moment, the building continues to be safe for our crews to go and work in.
In the confusion, many people are worried about what's happened to family and friends.
Right? Very, very, very sorry. Tito, I'm alive. I'm all right. I'm in Arrow Club.
The building had recently been refurbished. A residents' action group say they've been complaining for years about fire safety and that only a catastrophic event would expose the issues.
So I peeked through the window. I saw fire engines everywhere. I think one of them could have pressed our bells to say, wake up all of you, there's fire in your building. Nothing.
Were there no alarms in the corridor?
No alarm. Nothing. Nothing.
In the 2.5 years I was there was never an evacuation test. Then one of the new boilers tripped out the beginning of last year, and we lost power to the building. And half of the emergency stairwell was not lit, so the emergency lighting did not work on half of the stairwell.
The official advice to residents in the event of a fire was to stay within their flats and await rescue. But the Mayor of London says that firefighters couldn't get above the 12th floor. He says that questions will need to be answered as soon as possible about what went wrong.
You're right to raise the question about issues raised by tenants on that block and others. And the reason why it should be a huge source of concern for all of us is there are many tower blocks across London and across the country. Many of them are the responsibility of local authorities. Others are the responsibility of private management companies. And we need to make sure that the legitimate questions people have are answered. But you'll appreciate that our focus today has to be search and rescue and then recovery.
In the early hours of the morning, one man spoke on the phone to a relative trapped on the 21st floor.
The woman sounds like calm, and she wasn't panicked or anything. And I said, where is your husband? She said, he's talking to the emergency. And I said, why didn't you come out? She said, they tell us to stay in. We cannot come out. And I said, what did they ask you to do? She said, they asked us to cover the doors with towels. And she said, but the fire is coming heavily. And then about, I think, 10, 15 minutes later, we phoned them back. And I said, where is your husband? She said, he's still talking. And they said, they're coming to us. And I said, what happened? She said, the last thing she said, smoke is coming heavily through the door into the flat. And that was the last time we heard of her.
More than 200 firefighters were deployed. Residents who were led to safety by them praised their courage.
As I was going downstairs, you had 3 firefighters going up the stairs, putting their BA sets on, basically going up, trying to rescue as many people as they possibly did.
The authorities admit that at the moment they have no idea how many people are still unaccounted for.
You know, I pray to God that they're okay. The fire did go and spread to that part of the building, their parts of the building, and I know that I was told from people who had managed to contact them that they had moved to the flats next door, but we've asked around. I know people, the services and the authorities here are still trying to gather information. We've gone to several of the rescue centres that have been set up and asked and given names, but we've had nothing so far. I know it takes a while. I'm just praying to God that they're all right.
Pictures and names of the missing are now being circulated with appeals for information. Among them, well-known artist GijTeMas.
Khadija sent out a message about 12 hours ago to say that she was trapped and that everybody should pray for her. We've come down trying to look for her. We've been everywhere. We can't find her.
London hospitals dealt with dozens of casualties, as well as those seeking information about loved ones who are missing. The scale of the inferno means it could be many hours or even days before the final numbers of dead and injured from this disaster are known. Ian Woods, Sky News.
Ian Woods there. Well, let's bring in now Sky's Mark White. He's a little bit closer to the tower than I am. He's got a slightly different perspective on what's actually going on there. Mark, from where we are, it looks like the firefighters have stopped pouring water into the 17th, 18th floor, which is what they have been doing throughout the last 2 hours. What are you able to tell us about what's happening there?
Yeah, we're on the Latimer Road side of the building here, and from our perspective, you can see there was some significant flame coming from a number of the windows about a couple of hours ago or so. They have, for the most part, died down. Every now and again, there's still a an eruption of flames from one of the windows, and we can see firefighters occasionally coming to what is effectively a burnt-out shell of a window. The glass in the window flame has long since gone, and you see the odd squirt of water from their hose reels as they're damping down some of the hot spots inside. But I think you're looking at one of the flats there where you can still see orange flames flickering away inside that particular flat. And that's the difficulty that the firefighters are really faced with here, because they've been making their way systematically through flat after flat, room after room, but they're still dealing with these hot spots that can flare up at any moment with combustible material still inside these flats. And in addition to that, of course, there's a lot of detritus wreckage inside the flats from the intensity of the fire, ceiling collapses. They're having to look under all of this to try and find those who are unaccounted for. It's an absolutely horrible task chain that they are involved in, and it's going to be a protracted operation throughout the afternoon and into tomorrow, undoubtedly.
And Mark, questions too about the advice that those in the tower were given. We understand that the official fire safety advice, and that had been reiterated recently in a visit, and there were posters up in the tower, was to stay in your flat if there was a fire.
Yes, some real concern about that, and whether in the face of what's happened here, it would seem self-evident that that is not the right advice to be giving to people in high-rise buildings. It is common advice, we understand, through a lot of high-rise buildings from management associations. We've got hold of one particular poster from this building that does tell residents that if there's a fire, if it's not in their own flat, then they should get in their flat, close the door, try and secure it as best they can, and let effectively the fire service deal with the flat elsewhere in the tower block. But because of the way in which this fire took hold, spreading so rapidly around the building, we believe on this cladding on the outside of the building, it then managed to penetrate into the internal structure and the rooms within the tower block itself, and those who would have stayed in there may well have perished, obeying what they thought was the proper procedure to keep them safe. Now, we spoke a little earlier today to David Collins. He was a member of the Residents Association in this tower block, and he told me that he had constant run-ins with the management group here, particularly over the issue of fire safety.
There may have been fire alarm tests with the fire brigade. I've witnessed the fire brigade be in the tower block. But in the 2.5 years I was there was never an evacuation test.
And in terms of the protocols for dealing with a blaze within the tower block, the instruction, as you understand it from the management organisation to the tenants, is stay within your flat?
Yes, it was to stay in your flat and await rescue, await recovery.
Well, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan says that the first priority has to be the rescue and recovery, the search and rescue operation that is still ongoing in the building behind me. Then there will be time for the post-mortem into what exactly happened in terms of the fire itself, how it spread so quickly, and whether the right advice was given. But he said those are absolutely legitimate questions that should be asked in the fullness of time.
The focus of the experts today is the search and rescue. Very soon, I'm afraid, it'll move on to recovery. But there are genuine concerns, reasonable concerns that have been raised during the course of the night, and it's really important that these questions are answered.
Well, Ryden Construction, a company that carried out a major refurbishment of this tower block just a year ago, has come under some question in terms of whether that construction work was safe in terms of the cladding that was on the outside of the building, the placement of boilers, fuse boxes. They've issued a statement today in which they say Ryden completed a refurbishment of the building in the summer of 2016 for Kensington and Chelsea Tenant Management Organisation on behalf of the council, which met all the required building control, fire regulations and health and safety standards. We will cooperate with the relevant authorities and emergency services and fully support their inquiries into the causes of this fire at the appropriate time. And the appropriate time, of course, I think as far as everyone is concerned really, should be once the immediate urban search and rescue operation is concluded. And as I say, Jane, just because of the absolute devastation in the tower block behind me, because of the number of people that appear to still be unaccounted for at this stage, that search and recovery operation may take some time yet.
It certainly will, Mark. Thanks very much for that. Where we are now, we can see that the firefighters have now retrained their hoses on the building. They are still continuing to try to soak the building sort of in the centre of the flats around the 17th, 18th floor. Interesting talking to Mark there. He was talking to David Collins. He was somebody who was involved in the Grenfell Residents Association and had concerns about safety in the building, about fire safety. I'm joined now by Councillor Judith Blakeman. You know David Collins well.
I know David very well. I worked with him when the initial complaints were raised.
Just talk us through what concerns residents had and what the council's reactions to them were.
Well, in 2013 there was a massive power surge in the block which knocked out all the electrical devices in people's homes up to about the 10th floor. That was when they first started raising concerns about the safety of the building, what would happen if there was a major fire. And they were told that the fire brigade had inspected it and it was no problem, and if there was a small fire, that this go into your flat and stay policy would apply and they would be perfectly safe for about an hour. During the refurbishment project, there were a lot of problems came up and residents raised them with the TMO and with the council. I raised them. I sent 19...
What sort of concerns?
There were